Well, what happened was I became the Bible teacher at our secondary school in Barbados. And in the Adventist system, in our schools, we have twice a year, we have a thing called the Week of Prayer, in which a minister will come in and spend a week with the students, preaching and helping them solve their spiritual problems and hoping to get them baptized. And on the Friday before the Week of Prayer was scheduled to begin, the speaker became sick. And so the education director called me into the office and said, Ken, the speaker cannot come, so you have to conduct the Week of Prayer, boy. So I said, all right. So I conducted the Week of Prayer, and there were 67 students in the school who were not baptized. And when I got through, 66 got baptized. The other one didn't get baptized because his mother begged me not to baptize him. Well, when it happened, I said, oh, this is very interesting. I must test this out again. So the next term, I taught during the day and I preached at night. I pitched a tent near the school and preached at night. I had a crusade that lasted probably about 6 weeks. At the end of that crusade, I baptized more people than the ministers were baptizing who were doing ministry full-time throughout the entire conference. And then I said, oh, I see, this is my calling. So I will go back into this. And that's how I got back into the ministry. Yes. And then, the matter of psychology and ministry, what happened was, because of my interest in psychology and so on, and the discovery of the people at the conference office about my interest in that, they decided to use me to help train colporteurs in persuading people to buy books and that kind of stuff. And so I went to one of their programs, and while waiting to deliver my seminar, the head of the colporteur department from the union read a quotation in which it said, "He who will lead souls to Jesus must study the workings of the human mind." And I said, oh, so that is the secret of winning souls? Studying the workings of the human mind? And so I decided to apply what I had discovered about how the human mind works to how to win souls. Well, that came in very handy because I never thought I could be an evangelist because of the way evangelists worked. I used to watch them preach long sermons, an hour, and then they begin to sing all the verses of "Just as I am" without one plea. And they would beg, is there one who would come to Jesus tonight? And nobody would move. And they would pretend to cry, and then somebody would get up to feel sorry for them. And I said, no, I cannot do that. That's absurd. But when I discovered that if you understand how the human mind works, you don't need to do that. In fact, at that point, I began to limit my sermons to half an hour. And I instead of having to spend long times begging people to come to the altar, I used to tell them before I preach that when I am through with the sermon, I'm going to ask all of you who have not yet given your life to Jesus to get up and come up here and give your life to Jesus. And they would do that without my having to beg and plead and sing sad songs and all of that. And so that made a terrific difference in the approach. So much so that after a while the conference began to send other ministers to be trained by me in the crusades, and they were totally taken up with the idea that you could win souls without preaching long and without making them feel scared or making them feel sorry for Jesus. And I began to tell them, every minute you preach after half an hour, you lose 6 souls. And that was interesting because Christopher, my first boy, used to observe me. And I cannot forget, one day he came home and said, "Daddy, I passed by a man preaching, and he was letting the souls pass through his fingers." Yes. And so there was something else that happened, though, that made the psychology business very important. I was in this crusade, the first one I had in Barbados, the first tent crusade. And I announced, Sabbath is baptism. People surrounded me at the end of the sermon and said, we want to get baptized, but we have problems. We cannot get baptized with all these problems. And I suddenly said, okay, I'm going to have a Bible class this week. I'm going to call it the Overcomers Bible Class. And everybody will have all their problems solved before Saturday. So I did that. But on Tuesday night, they came to me and said to me, all the problems are already solved. Why do we have to worry about the rest of the week? Well, that spread throughout the island, and people began to say, if you have a problem, go and see Pastor Wiggins. And that is how I got into the counseling part in the ministry.